She plots with her lover, who's called Gronu, to to murder Llay. Oh dear. Welcome to the 12 Days of Celtic Mythology, Season 4, Day 2. If you're looking for the drop-in center for the terminally Celtic, you're in the right place. So first off, thanks for the amazing responses in the comments section of yesterday's video. Yeah, my spreadsheet's likely to explode. Be sure to read other people's comments and comment on their comments. Let's get a conversation going in the comments as well, because that's good for you guys. So a few people in yesterday's comments mentioned Cernunnos with reference to the stag. And while Cernunnos is definitely real and he's definitely Celtic, he doesn't really figure in mythology and folklore. He's only known from ancient inscriptions and carvings. So that's the kind of thing where you need to watch the wording of my question a little bit more closely, maybe. Someone also brought in the oak and the holly king. And this is a modern invention from Robert Graves, I think it was originally. And the 8 stags that someone tried to tie in with the oak and holly king, that must just be the invention of one modern writer or teacher, I guess. I've not read Robert Graves very much because I've never even heard of that before. Yesterday, I wondered whether the question was a bit too hard. The live group were a bit subdued, but based on the amazing answers in the comments yesterday, I'd say the question was okay. I also got a lovely comment over on my Patreon page that I want to share with you. So she writes, "Thank you for doing this. I love the game element of the challenge." That's good, because I'm not really a gamifying kind of person. I spent a good hour reading the stories from the Celtic heroic age afterward, and then more time reading the Mabinogi online. And it wouldn't have happened without this little push you provided. Oh, that's just the kind of response that makes what I do worthwhile. So this person mentioned the Celtic heroic age and the Mabinogi online. So let's see what she's talking about and also look at some other sources that I'll be using today. So the Celtic heroic age is a book. It's a fabulous collection of early Celtic texts. It starts with 2 of the longest early Celtic inscriptions, and it works its way through to the medieval texts of Ireland and Wales. This book's an absolute TARDIS of good translations of things. You might be able to find a copy for sale, but if it's beyond your budget, you can also find it on archive.org and just use it to read and look things up. There's also a good modern translation of the 4 branches of the Mabinogi online at mabinogi.net. No translation is perfect. This translation isn't perfect. And this is obviously the draft from the book he wrote, and there are a few typos, you know. But I like this one for beginners because it has very good notes that will help you understand what you're reading. They're hyperlinked in the text, you know, they're like footnotes, but you can click them and it takes you to the note, and then there's something you can click and it'll take you right back to your place in the text. So it's just a really great resource. I hope he keeps it going. Now, I'll also be using Arthur in Early Welsh Poetry by Nerys and Jones today. This is a good collection of poems with fresh editions and translations and some good background on the manuscripts they come from. And finally, the wonderful Triads of Britain by Rachel Bromwich. You don't really need this book if you're a beginner, but if you're serious about Welsh studies, then you will eventually need a copy. It's currently in print, and while copies are not cheap, the prices aren't as bad as they get during times when it's out of print. But the University of Wales Press now also sells electronic copies. And I personally really like their PDF version. I think they have an e-reader version as well. But the PDF version is just excellent. And my students have had issues with the Kindle version, not the one sold by the University of Wales, but the actual Kindle version. I don't know what the University of Wales Press e-reader version is like, but the Kindle version, the page numbers are unstable. And if you're studying, other books are going to refer you to specific pages in this book. And with Kindle, you'll just be lost. So I'll put a link to find that PDF edition, which is not at all expensive, in today's notes. So let's have a story. One day Arthur, the war leader, was walking in a wooded Cornish valley. He paused to look up at a beautiful oak tree. It was so high, so beautiful. Like many nobles, Arthur sometimes liked to turn his hand to poetry. And he was just thinking that perhaps he would compose a few lines in honor of this magnificent oak, when he had the uncomfortable feeling of being watched. And something drew his eye upward, and that's when he saw the eagle, perched high in the tree, staring at him intently. And then gave a little chuckle, as eagles will do. Their little bird voice is quite a gentle one. "Oh, eagle," said Arthur, "why do you stare at me so? Why are you laughing at me, who only stopped to make a poem?" And the eagle replied, "Well, Arthur, with your fame and your feasting, I've seen you before." "But why did you laugh? Why do you stare at me?" said Arthur. "Oh, Arthur," replied the eagle, "you are famous with your bear-like strength and your jolly bearing. I've seen you before." "But eagle, up there in your tree," said Arthur, "you wouldn't be here talking to me if you were a proper eagle. You wouldn't be tame or gentle." "Oh, Arthur," said the eagle, "you whose enemies cannot withstand your ferocious swordplay, I am the son of Madog, son of Uther." "Eagle," Arthur replied, "I don't understand how that lineage is possible, or why you are here in this Cornish forest, but this much I know, the son of Madog is dead." "Ah, you speak so beautifully, Arthur, bear of a fighter. I used to be called Elulad." "You also speak faultlessly, O far-sighted one," said Arthur. "Can you be Elulad, my nephew?" "Stalwart Arthur, slayer of enemy hosts, I am proud to be your kinsman." Then Arthur said, "O eagle of guileless speech, if you are Elulad, is it possible to fight for your release from this form? Your answer is courageous, but there is no enemy for you to do battle with," said the eagle. "Death cannot be defeated." "Those are honest words," said Arthur. "But is there no way to win you back to life?" "O Arthur, leader of the finest men," said the eagle, "if the word of God is to be believed, it is pointless to try to overcome him." If you'd like to delve a little deeper into the topics in my videos, you might enjoy taking one of my online classes. There's almost always something on offer. Some classes have tiered pay-what-you-can pricing, and there are usually a few scholarships available for the more expensive classes. To get notifications about classes and about scholarships when they're announced, you can go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter, or follow me on my Patreon page. So you may recognize this as a paraphrase of an early Welsh poem called The Dialogue of Arthur and the Eagle. The oldest version of this poem is found in the 14th century manuscript, but the language is more like 12th or 13th century, they say. So the poem was probably already old when this version was written down. Now this poem was very popular in Wales from the 12th century all the way to the 19th. It got copied in all sorts of different old manuscripts, and bits were added, and bits were dropped. Early on, it acquired more and more Christian stanzas, in which the eagle, who appears to know more about Christianity than Arthur does, instructs Arthur in the finer points of religion. Now, I'd always thought that they were just part of the poem, but it seems that much of that material may have been added later. So Narasan Jones gives us some background in her edition. The earliest surviving copy of the text is found in Oxford Jesus College Manuscript 20. Now, just because it's Oxford Jesus College doesn't specifically mean it's a Christian book, right? That's just the name of a college at Oxford. Oxford Jesus College Manuscript 20, kept at the Bodleian Library. It opens the collection, that is, it's the first thing in the manuscript, and is headed by a rubric added by the main scribe in red ink. This is the way the stanzas of the eagle are declared. And at the end of the 47 stanzas, the scribe has added, using the same ink as the poem itself, i.e. not red ink, And this is how the stanzas of the Eagle terminate. Now, the last 5 stanzas, however, belong to the beginning of another poem. This is what Nara San Jones is telling us. She knows from her research that the last 5 stanzas above where the scribe has written this are not part of this poem usually. So they belong to another poem containing religious instruction, which must have followed it in an earlier copy. Poems written in a dialogue form were quite common in early Welsh poetry and Irish poetry as well. And they often either contain prophecy, usually of a political nature, but sometimes mixed with end of the world type stuff, or they offer religious instruction, where a saint or some pious person or an animal instructs someone who isn't yet schooled in the ways of Christianity. Arthur and the Eagle has very much been one of those poems over the centuries, but perhaps it started out less so, maybe even based on an earlier myth of some kind. Nares Jones also includes 4 final stanzas in her edition, which were not in the oldest manuscript, but they are found in some later ones. And she feels like they finish things up rather beautifully. O eagle of guileless speech, if you are Iliulad, is it fitting to fight for you? So he's saying, who do I stab to get you back into your life as my nephew? O Arthur, whose answer is courageous, no enemy stands fast against you. From death, no one will escape. O eagle of honest speech, could someone by means of warfare win you again alive? So he still wants to just stab somebody. Arthur, leader of noble ones, if the words of the canon, that is, the word of God, the Bible, are believed, it is of no use to contend with God. So Arthur's willingness to free his nephew from the state of death, it's really touching. I think what he's trying to say is that God has decreed Eliulad's death, so it's impossible to reverse it. Now, Eliulad himself seems to have had an independent existence in medieval Welsh lore. He's remembered as eloquent and bard-like. In one of these fabulous lists that medieval scribes love, we find him as one of the 3 golden-tongued knights in Arthur's court. So the 24 knights of Arthur's court is divided into triads, and this triad has Eliulad, son of Madog, son of Uther, as one of these 3 golden-tongued knights. Unfortunately, if you want to read this poem, Arthur and the Eagle, there doesn't seem to be a decent translation available online. I'm sorry about that. There's one from the early 19th century that pops up on a few websites. I was having a look, but I wouldn't recommend it. The scholarship isn't very good, probably was for its time, but scholarship in medieval Welsh has improved a lot since the beginning of the 19th century. I couldn't find a translation other than Nara San Jones in any of my books of early Welsh poetry either. If anyone knows of one, do let me know in the comments. However, Gwilym Morris Baird has made a video, which is on his channel, Celtic Source, where he goes through the poem using Nares Jones' translation. So you can find most or all of the parts of the poem that she translated, and Gwyl's commentary is very interesting too. But Nara San Jones didn't translate the whole poem, only the interesting bits. She left out a lot of the Christian preaching stuff. So I'm sure some of you are thinking about Lle Llaw Gyffes in the 4th branch of the Mabinogi. So let's just make sure we've got the story, that story straight. So Lle is the son of Aranrhod, who wants nothing to do with him. So he's been raised by his uncle, the magician Gwydion. Lle's married now. He has a wife called Blodeudd, and she's unfaithful to him. She plots with her lover, who's called Gronw, to murder Lle, but he's protected by Gwydion's strong magic. So that's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to kill him. However, Blodeudd gets him to tell her, where the holes are in this magic so that he can be killed. What would have to be done? And so she gets him into the necessary vulnerable position. And at the right moment, her lover Gronw is meant to appear and throw a spear at him. And it all goes to plan. Gronw throws the spear, but his aim's a little bit off. He only wounds Lle. It doesn't kill him. Slay gives a terrible scream and turns into an eagle, flying away with a spear still protruding from his body. So no one knows where the eagle has gone. Gwydion searches high and low. Oh, he's got to find his precious nephew. Then one day he meets a farmer who has a sow, a female pig, who disappears every morning when he lets her out to forage, and he has no idea where she gets to. So on a hunch, Gwydion follows this sow, and he finds that she's eating maggots that are dropping from an oak tree. And so he looks up and he sees the wounded eagle high up in the oak tree with this maggot-infested wound, and the maggots dropping out. And Gwydion uses a series of magical stanzas of poetry. He coaxes the eagle down, and he then strikes the eagle with his magic wand, putting Llay back into his human form. He takes him home and restores him to health, and then the fourth branch goes on. So this part of the fourth branch connects to several other stories, and I love connections. There are parallels with the death of Myrddin, told in the life of St. Kentigern. There are parallels with the Irish story about the death of Cuireadh Mac Dara, and also with Arthur and the Eagle that we've just been listening to. This is the kind of thing I'll be covering in more depth in the new Mabinogi Connections course as I go through the Mabinogi with that in mind. Where are the other stories in Celtic lore that are like the stories we're reading? So we've got a very close parallel here. We've got a dead or nearly dead noble warrior. In the case of Llay, also a supernatural being, but certainly a noble warrior. They take the form of an eagle when they die or are nearly killed. So Llay is only nearly killed. Elulad, obviously, he got killed. This warrior's uncle, remember Arthur identifies himself as the uncle of Elulad. This warrior's uncle, who calls himself a poet, Arthur's stopped, he calls himself a poet. Gwydion is often seen as a poet as well as a magician. They enter into a kind of dialogue with the eagle. Now, in the story of Llay, the eagle doesn't speak back to Gwydion. But each time Gwydion recites another stanza of poetry, the eagle comes a little closer to him. So it is a kind of dialogue. The eagle responds each time that Gwydion says his poem. Now, there's room for all kinds of conjecture here about how these stories might be connected. Do they have a common antecedent further back in Celtic myth, back in the Misty Reaches? Did one story inspire the other? It's interesting to think about, but I wouldn't get too wedded to any one theory. So I've spent some time today discussing the history of Arthur and the Eagle as a text. So the text means the written thing. So if you have a first edition and a third edition of the same book, you've only got one text. Do you understand what I'm saying? Even though you've got two copies of it, you've got two copies, it's still just one text. That's an important bit of jargon in medieval studies and stuff. So this text existed before it was copied into Jesus College 20 in the 14th century. We know that because it's clearly a copy, one which Nerissa Ann Jones tells us in her book, where the scribe who copied it, the guy who wrote it into Jesus College 20, he was clearly struggling with the writing of the manuscript he was copying from. We can tell that by the kinds of little errors he makes. Then we've heard how stanzas were added and dropped over the centuries. I just want to go back to what I said there, because when I said little errors he makes, I mean like little errors in spelling. Yeah, not like errors in the meaning necessarily, but just things that a paleographer is going to spot and go, aha, yes, he's having trouble reading language from 200 years previously. So we've heard how stanzas were added and dropped over the centuries. I've mentioned a 19th century translation that does the rounds on the internet which isn't very good. Now, the internet is now another place that texts live. So texts don't have to live on paper anymore. They can exist electronically. They can exist on the internet. And that's another way they get circulated. Used to be you had to go to a library and borrow a book, or somebody lent you a book, or, whatever, you bought a book. Now you can just, find lots of things online. So that's another bit to it. The 19th century translation makes its way onto the internet and circulates readily because nobody has a copyright on it. And I also mentioned that it seems hard to find better English translations. I think there are some translations into modern Welsh, which, if you speak Welsh, if you read Welsh, are useful to you, but not to the rest of us. Nerisan Jones mentions that she has taken some stanzas from a different manuscript tradition and combined them with the stanzas from Jesus College 20, because she feels that they complete the text better. So that's a lot of things that have happened to this poem since wherever it starts from. And does the story start with the poem, or is the story older? So here comes today's question. Now, this is very much an opinion question. You don't have to look anything up. But do make sure that you're giving me your opinion on the question I'm asking, not just flapping on about eagles in trees, right? So my question is, why do you think understanding the history of a text from earliest beginnings down to current translations helps us make sense of a mythological story? I know some people are writing, so I'm going to say it again, just reword it slightly. Why do you think understanding the history of a text helps us to interpret the myth it recounts? So I know my question sounds very fancy and very scholarly, but you don't have to make your answer long and fancy, and just put it in your own words. Say what you think. Why is this important? So that's it for today, and tomorrow there will be lots and lots of magical animals and not quite so much about texts. So I'll see you then. Bye-bye for now.